Hello everybody, welcome to today's show. My name is Spencer Walsh. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We have a great one for you. We're talking about today the latest in reconciliation negotiations. Business interests are using ads and other efforts to cajole Democrats to kill or change a $3.5 trillion social policy bill. We will see how that goes. Also, we're going to continue to take a look at some of the biggest kind of chumps and awful people involved in the fights over infrastructure and the Biden agenda, and that includes Joe Manchin. He demanded a bank bailout just before slamming entitlement mentality. Also, we take a look at an oft under-discussed member of the kind of Democratic corporate squad, and that is Josh Gottheimer in the House, really being the bagman for the biggest and worst corporate billionaires. Also, we have a wave of U.S. labor strikes. Could see tens of thousands of workers on strike within weeks. Also, Kyrsten Sinema being confronted, and Joe Biden pretty much seems to be vibing with it. Really making kind of not making a very strong condemnation. He did say the tactics were inappropriate, but he did say it is part of the process. We will talk about, was the confrontation of Kyrsten Sinema in the bathroom, did it go too far or not? We'll also take a look at what Biden's response is to that, and of course give you the full context of everything going on with the infrastructure bill as we continue to keep you informed on what's going on in the government. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're starting at the top of the show with a look into the lobbying going on behind Biden's big bill. As centrist Democrats in Congress had worked to block or strip out the major provisions of Biden's $3.5 trillion social safety net and climate plan, a slew of online ads popped up in states and districts lavishing praise on them. So, yeah, this is going to be very interesting to really test the effect of political ads in the long term and who will do propaganda for them. Because they have, people, it almost like you really had to expect and really much see this coming, because these people, we saw them have fundraisers, we saw them get money, and we saw them do what they do to, kill the president's agenda, and really gum up the works for any sort of just small transfer, like any kind of like significant change, for Americans. They were pretty much really being this is some pretty crazy stuff that we're seeing coming out here from some of these ads. One calls Senator Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona, who's emerged as a leading holdout on the measure, as an independent voice and a bipartisan leader. Obviously, giving those positive terms that they think voters are going to like to hear. Another says Representative Kurt Schrader of Oregon is pushing for the Biden-Schrader agenda, though he clearly opposes key portions of, again, the president's package. And the question is, will people buy this stuff? Will probably mostly old conservative voters are going to see this. I don't know if there are going to be people who are already would have voted for a Republican, would already vote are squarely in the Sinema camp. But the swing voters in this area, I really do not think they're going to be really looking at these television ads. And I don't know if they're billboards or televisions, but one thing that these ads all have in common, of course, there is one for Kathleen Rice of New York as well. And again, the funny thing is, this is the thing that really has been discredited, and the battle's been fought of this and really discredited, over the past week, was this is just not part of the Biden agenda. Biden is on the other side here. These people, these representatives are actively going out of the way of a lot of the wishes of the Democratic people and the constituents they represent, and opposing key parts of the Biden agenda, really stopping it from getting done, making the president look bad, hindering a lot of key relief to Americans right now. And I'm not saying, you shouldn't be allowed to make the president look bad, but, you shouldn't also be able to run from it. And you shouldn't be able to pretend like you're making the president look good. Like, if you're going to actually make a stand on the president, and have such an issue with his agenda like you clearly do, say why, first of all, and second of all, actually just have the stones to come up and say, yeah, I'm doing this because it's the president's agenda that I'm opposing. I'm not supporting the president's agenda here. That's very, very important. So, these ads, though, they're all funded by groups such as the pharmaceutical industry and business interests that are lobbying hard to kill or reshape crucial pieces of the president's plan. As Democrats labor to keep Biden's proposal on track in Congress amid deep internal divisions, a robust influence campaign is meeting at every turn. Business groups are working in overdrive to fight large swaths of it, such as raising taxes on the wealthy and corporations, expanding Medicare to cover dental, hearing, and vision services, and propose taxes and fees to cut down on carbon emissions. So pretty much where it looks like we're seeing Biden on this is he has, I think, firmly taken the left-wing side on this, as opposed to linking the two bills together. So there will be a reconciliation bill. The self-imposed deadlines the moderates were trying to put on have pretty much been firmly, I think, at this point shifted off. The question is, what will be the quality of the final bill? Biden said that number is going to have to come down. We'll see how much, and what will this progressive squad, and pretty big progressive squad, with newfound power, we're going to see, first of all, what the kind of centrist and Democratic leadership are going to try and do to the bill, and if progressives will have the strength and the cojones to stand up to the bill if it is bad. But there is, a serious and severe infrastructure, push going on to change the tide on this. So the efforts unfolding less conspicuously than previous lobbying pushes. Pandemic restrictions have limited large gatherings of lobbyists at the Capitol. So the corridor outside the Senate Finance Committee's office, which has long been known as Gucci Gulch, is no longer overrun with shiny Italian shoes. Ugh, just such a bad, just people like lobbyists just like loitering outside the Senate Finance, like they're trying to pick up like a prostitute. Really just very evocative. But it is, of course, good that if the one good side of the pandemic is it's keeping lobbyists at least out of the freaking Capitol in person. Again, it's not like Zoom doesn't exist. But as I can say, the campaign is proceeding as intensely as ever, just not as conspicuously as via individual meetings, Zoom calls, fundraisers, and the airwaves. More than 4,000 lobbyists are working on budget and spending issues, according to Open Secrets, a nonprofit watchdog group that tracks money in politics. At least more than 4,000. It could be a much, much higher number. Probably safe to assume it is. 10 major industries have spent nearly $700 million this year on lobbying, the group has said. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which is lobbying to kill the bill because of its tax increases, has already spent about $300 million in this year on lobbyists. The pharmaceutical industry, which is trying to defeat the proposal in the measure to bring down drug costs, has spent more than $15 million. Every group is reaching out and they want a meeting, says Elizabeth Warren, Democrat in Massachusetts, one of the chief champions of using the far-reaching budget bill to raise taxes on the wealthy. If they don't get a commitment in the first meeting, they want a second meeting, and a third meeting, and then a fourth. And they're paying very close attention. Their people are ruthless, and they're the people who Kristen Sinema actually listens to. It's going to be very, very important here. The contrast about the outrage that people expressed about, months and years of people trying to get, constituents actually trying to reach out to Kristen Sinema, for real actual grievances. People who live in Arizona, maybe they don't like something she's doing, they're allowed to say it. They're allowed to go to her office, and she shouldn't be trying to, run away. And, oh no, if they're from a group, is that the end of the world? Well, it shouldn't be if you're, like, any kind of competent politician, but, you tend to listen to the people who really, control you, the people who you answer to are literally the people who you're going to want to talk to. It's just as simple as that. Kristen Sinema does not answer to her constituents. She does answer to people in Phoenix spas that she likes to go visit right after her very important and very necessary foot appointments. So the influence campaigns, of course, cut both ways. Several political action committees are spending freely to broaden the bill even further and push for its enactment. The Building Back Better coalition, formed to support the proposals, spent nearly $7 million on advertising this month, including the ad that said CEOs in Big Pharma are lying to voters about Biden's plan. Let's take a look at the other money. So $15 million from the Chamber of Commerce, $30 million from the Chamber of Commerce, at least $15 million from the pharmaceutical industry, 10 major industries spending $700 million, and the best we can do on the other side is like $7 million or so of advertising, which is not a lot. And again, advertising and lobbying, very, very different. Perhaps no aspect of the package, and it really just shows you, like, this is a bill that, I think it's so worth supporting because you can tell how people, like, the best case for it is how badly and how poorly people are reacting to it. People are acting like this is just the worst thing ever. And when you see that, it's really pretty. It's pretty hard to imagine, like not wanting this bill to pass. Like I personally seeing this, am seeing this reaction from the other side here. It is 10 times more encouraging that Chamber of Commerce and all these people in the pharmaceutical industry is spending all this money on this, because it's not crazy radical proposals. It's not something like AOC. It's not AOC or Bernie's like dream bucket list, as we talked about in the last show, but it is in large part a pretty big step in the right direction. So Ken Frazier, the executive chairman of Merck, who has helped fund the ads, continued a recent call with reporters that companies are fighting the proposal so hard because they believe it would slash their revenue. He portrayed the lobbying push as altruistic, arguing that a decline in profit would lead to less money for research and development into new treatments and cures for cancer. We have looked at what this would be, Mr. Frazier said. We have modeled it, and our ability to fund R&D inside Merck will be reduced by almost half. You know what? I believe them. I think they're exactly right. Like, we got to stop it all now, We would not survive without Merck R&D. By the way, a lot of the research and the science behind a lot of what, these big pharmaceutical companies do is funded by the government. I think honestly, with the pharmaceutical companies, they've done so much good charity for us, They've done so many great things for this country, but I think they deserve a little break. Like, they need to, maybe we could do a little bit without the R&D, Ken. I'm sorry. I hate to be that guy, but, just had to say it, All right, we are back in a minute.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to our segment to tell you all about what's going on here on the Spencer Walsh Radio Network this summer. We do, as I'm sure you know, have a great lineup available for you. We, of course, start with our flagship show, Newsflash, all new Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Uncultured, irregularly back every Saturday with live music and sports analysis. With my co-host for the summer, Bennett Laxton. Hidden History will be brand new every Thursday on a bit of a hiatus, but will return shortly. It's the summer of podcasting. It's the summer of sounds. All you got to do is just keep listening wherever you get your podcasts, always here on the Spencer Walsh Radio Network.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are continuing our kind of demon roundup here as we go through some of the people most responsible for kind of holding back the Biden agenda here at this point, are people who are most controlled by the pharmaceutical industry or whatever. In this case, it's Joe Manchin and the coal industry. He literally, he's been up to some pretty crazy stuff recently. He threatened to kill his party's climate, health care, and anti-poverty legislation, telling reporters, "I cannot accept our economy, basically our society, moving toward an entitlement mentality." So this is what he's worrying about. Really, it's very thoughtful for him to look out for us, but he is worried about an entitlement mentality coming in across the American populace. Like, again, so a populace that has, fundamentally been, its back has been turned on. Like, the government has fundamentally abandoned the parts of America that this bill would actually help for once. And Joe Manchin is, again, worried now about, of all things, an entitlement mentality.
Means testing means that are we targeting the people that need it or getting it, or the people getting it that maybe could do without? I mean, they're in pretty good shape. So I said means testing. I said work requirements. Those are all very, very important in these things. And that way you target children. So you have the beginning of life, our children. Pre-K, yes. Then you have the end where our senior citizens want to live in the dignity and respect of their own home. We can do that with some assistance. And again, some can pay a little bit, and some can't pay any. That's means testing. It goes an awful long way that way. I'm just not, so you know. I cannot.
And again, this just ridiculous refusal to hoard resources when it comes to poor people or people people are sick, people trying to retire in dignity. We cannot give them a penny more than what they absolutely need. We have to pay exactly for one meal a day or whatever, or they're going to get too greedy or entitled. That is the mindset that they have. It's just incredible how that has continued to pervade through American politics. that penny pinching and, when it comes to government is only acceptable when it comes to the poorest people, but when it comes to, like, people who, maybe made a little bit of a mistake in the banking industry, open it up, obviously. Manchin's declaration comes, again, 13 years after he played a pivotal role in pushing a massive Wall Street bailout that funneled hundreds of billions of dollars of public money to banks whose financial crisis destroyed the economy and ravaged West Virginia with mass foreclosures. The bailed out banks quickly paid themselves huge government-subsidized bonuses and later bankrolled Manchin's political campaigns. On October 1st, 2008, Manchin used his position as West Virginia governor to intervene in contentious debate over the federal government's response to the financial crisis, co-authoring a letter to senators demanding that Congress immediately hand over cash to the bank executives. Literally a stick-em-up operation here by some of the banking industry's most friendly senators. At the time, it was also with the governor, Texas Governor Rick Perry, bipartisanship. There is a time for partisanship, and there's a time for getting things done, said Manchin and Perry. No one likes the hand they've been dealt, and now is not the time to assign blame. What? That is crazy. That is so crazy. And then again, yet now, where is that mindset? It is completely gone. It's completely out the window. And this is Joe Manchin, not the only one here. This is a pervasive ideology that just goes through every single aspect of the American government when it comes to how it deals with people on a social level, economic level, political level. Like, it cares about, doing everything for a small few, but for the large majority of people, like, it's just, no thanks. So they continued. Americans across the country and in every demographic are feeling the pinch. If Congress does not act soon, the situation will grow appreciably worse. It's time for leadership. Congress needs to act now. Congress business lobbyists up the pressure for bailout bill. Read the headline from the AP about the letter, which helped create some momentum to pass the measure in the Senate the same day. As the bailout enriched Wall Street executives, the Center for Responsible Lending reported that regulators' failure to curb abuses in subprime mortgage lending would result in more than 15,000 West Virginia foreclosures and nearly $350 million of lost home equity in the state. Well, Joe Manchin is on a yacht, so he's too busy. He's got a lot of meetings, and he's all on the same page with all the folks, but he was just a little bit busy. And again, like, he has deep and personal ties to, like, all the stuff that he's regulating on, whether it be through campaign donations or whether it be his role with, an energy company where he, all his assets have been put in a blind trust. Of course he does, so he still gets the stock dividends, and he knows he will get more money if he favors coal through his policy. But also his son is there, and, he's not going to pass policy to, like, help his family, and some of this climate provision stuff in the bill not looking so good. A reporter literally asked him about it, and he just goes, "Yeah, you may want to change the subject, bud. You stop talking right now." Like that is the level. Like, this is, like, not only can they just blatantly, appear corrupt, say these things, but then they can threaten and act like nothing happened. Just some pretty crazy stuff. Here's another one who's really quite crazy. The Democratic congressman leading the charge to undermine his party's two-track strategy to pass the Joe Biden economic agenda in the U.S. House's biggest recipient of campaign cash from the private equity industry, whose executives could lose lucrative tax loopholes should the agenda become law. The lawmakers' former legislative directors also lobbying lawmakers on tax policy on behalf of the private equity industry, according to federal records reviewed by the Daily Poster. And that is Representative Josh Gottheimer. He has spearheaded a mediatorial legislative campaign to pass a business-backed infrastructure bill separate from Biden's reconciliation package, a mover backed by corporate lobbyists seeking to kill the latter because it will likely be paid for with tax on the wealthy. And, obviously, as we talked about, the bottom line of these people, these people just could see their, bottom line reduced. Gottheimer's campaign to short-circuit his own party strategy is a huge favorite of the Blackstone Group, the private equity behemoth whose wealthy executives are collectively his top campaign contributors. By the way, I should back up and say these last two stories are here from the Daily Poster and David Sirota and Andrew Perez. But anyway, this is again what is perfectly all about here. They don't even try and hide it. Like, what's going on. You know what these people are, trying to do. I think Sinema has been especially shameless. Manchin, he's a little bit more of a veteran. He'll try and hide it. But that image of him, up on that yacht with all the people in the kayaks and the people, of all things, started freaking out about, this is a little uncomfortable. Why are they going up to the boat? And there was bothering Manchin when he's on the boat like that. People saw that take floating around from some like blue check people. And then even better was the huge debate. Oh, is he even on a yacht or not? Like, this is the media folks that we have. Like, they're so, like, even the left-wing people ostensibly like this, just going around and getting into fights about, like, Joe Manchin is not on a yacht. This is a houseboat. Like, you're barking up the wrong tree here, man. You may disagree with Manchin on something, but he is not on a yacht right now, despite on what you may be seeing. So, yeah, his campaign to short-circuit his own party strategy was pretty much a favorite for the Blackstone group. And, so not a surprise, they're his top campaign contributors, and also stand to benefit from the passage of the bipartisan Senate bill and the death of the reconciliation legislation. In all, Blackstone executives have funneled nearly $200,000 worth of campaign cash to Gottheimer since 2015, and his wife, Marla Tusk, works for a lobbying and consulting firm whose website currently lists Blackstone as a client. So they're pretty much, a lot of their career, a lot of their lifestyle that I'm sure they very much enjoy is funded by Blackstone. In the last cycle alone, Gottheimer received more than $450,000 from donors in the private equity and investment industry, making him the U.S. House's top recipient of that money during the campaign, according to data compiled by Open Secrets. Again, this is like what private equity does, and now they literally buy off everything, they vulturize it, and they pretty much turn it to dust. And that's what they've done here. Like, they've gotten a congressman coming in, literally, again, just like we saw with Sinema, just like we see with Manchin, he does not answer to representatives and makes no bones about it. Doesn't even, try and pretend that he cares about, what representatives think. But is deeply, deeply connected to one of the most vulture-like, sores on our system in private equity. Under intensifying public pressure, Gottheimer has begun insisting he does not want to pass the reconciliation legislation just after the passage of, he does want to pass the reconciliation legislation, despite pretty much every piece of evidence pointing to the fact that he does not want to pass it and does not care about passing it, and really just wants to get the bipartisan infrastructure bill out of the way so he can tank the reconciliation one. So yeah, just after the passage of the Senate infrastructure bill, he's trying to get you to believe that he wants to pass the reconciliation bill, but it's an open secret in Washington that the attempt to delink the two bills is part of an effort to doom the reconciliation package, because separating the bills would eliminate incentive for conservative Democrats to vote for the far more progressive reconciliation bill. Gottheimer's moves are only the latest examples of his defense of the private equity industry. He obviously has championed a publicly funded bailout of the industry during the pandemic. Again, they're thinking, what industry do we need to bail out here the most? Private equity. And I bet you a bunch of those people live in his state, and I bet you a bunch of these people donate to his campaign, populate his fundraisers, and they would really, really benefit from something like the SALT tax deduction being put back on, which is pretty much a big tax break for billionaires and millionaires in the state. So Gottheimer's moves are only the latest examples of his defense of the private equity industry. So Gottheimer said that, what we are hearing from institutional investors looking to invest in private equity is part of their asset allocation strategy, encouraging witnesses to laud the private equity industry. This is what he said. That's a quote he said from a hearing to defending the industry from revelations that had been systematically fleecing retirement systems with exorbitant fees in exchange for weak investment returns. So it's pretty funny. He said, I think our job in the committee is to, of course, make sure that we are punishing bad actors while not interfering with those who produce good returns. Although the hearing is about, how the entire system is literally built off that with private equity. Blackstone has, for months, been pressing for the package of the Senate infrastructure bill that Gottheimer has been championing, including an op-ed authored by the company's billionaire CEO, Steven Schwarzman, who was previously an advisor to former President Donald Trump, and there's some good bipartisanship. The firm is a major private investor in infrastructure, and the legislation includes language encouraging local governments to funnel private infrastructure spending into public infrastructure spending into private equity firms. So a good little public-private partnership. Because literally, when private equity does take control of something, the way to make money out of it for them is to make it as slow as possible and as inefficient as possible, and that is exactly what we need with infrastructure. So yeah, it's going to be another very interesting thing, and why so many people really hated the bill on the Democratic side, and why they thought the reconciliation bill was so important. All right, we're going to talk about strikes striking the country next.
Buckingham Palace has announced the death of His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh.
It's news flash.
All right, let's move on to our second to last story today. Tens of thousands of workers around the U.S. could go on strike in the coming weeks in what would be the largest wave of labor unrest since a series of teacher strikes in 2018 and 2019, which won major victories and gave the American labor movement a significant boost. I think that was kind of like the absolute, we were kind of creating around the absolute bottom up until, from, I don't know, maybe about the mid-2000s up until 2015, 16, and 17, 18, that was when it began, I think, to grow up again. It's going to be a long, slow process, I think, for the American labor movement to get back to where it was in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. But it starts with stuff like this, and there's no better time to foment, militant, kind of radical labor movements in this country than right now. So the unrest spans a huge range of industries, from healthcare to Hollywood and academia. It was largely focused on higher wages, fighting cuts, and better working and safety conditions, especially due to COVID. It also plays out in the backdrop of an economy bouncing back from a torrid experience of the widespread economic shutdown during the coronavirus pandemic, one that is still marked by profound inequality. However, the pandemic is also seen as potentially providing a shot in the arm for U.S. labor unions by increasing bargaining power amid increased union drives and labor shortages in some industries. Because pretty much what's happening is, the labor shortage thing, we talked a lot about that kind of in the spring and the summer, talking about how this was such a kind of Chamber of Commerce op to pretty much make Americans think that, workers are getting lazy, the unemployment insurance is bad, we need them back in the office, we need to, pretty much most importantly, lower the standards and keep things, keep the kind of captive population exactly the way they were, which is kind of captive and willing to work and kind of being forced to work for whatever wage they wanted to. But the Biden stimulus and obviously some of the Trump stimulus as well created a pretty big market, and it created a raising of expectations and a boost for the workers coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic that really a lot of people did not see coming, and that of course led to workers reevaluating, not even always with the for better financial means, but just taking a look and saying, this job really sucks. And for a lot of service workers, it wasn't even, so much the wages and stuff like that. It was just people were being really awful, which is, disgusting to hear about every time I think about it. But yeah, treat if you're listening to this, I'm sure you do, but obviously always treat the service workers that you encounter with the utmost respect and dignity. But let's take a look at some of these strikes here. About 24,000 nurses and other healthcare workers at Kaiser Permanente in California, represented by the United Nurses Association of California Union of Healthcare Professionals, will vote on a strike authorization from the 1st to the 10th of October. The union took issue with the Kaiser Permanente's 1% wage increase for workers, cuts to the wages for new staff, and benefits cuts in the company's most recent offer. So again, this is coming after the pandemic. We're going to go, such essential workers, we love you guys, thank you so much. 1%. Wage increase and benefits cuts. That's your reward. So essential, right? 700 building engineers are at Kaiser Permanente in San Francisco are already on strike. An additional 3,400 health workers in Oregon and 7,400 health workers at USW at Kaiser also announced strike authorization votes. Other unions representing thousands of workers at the company were expiring union contracts are considering strike authorization votes, so things not looking good. So they're going to have a bit of a problem on their hands, especially Arlene Peasnell, Kaiser's senior vice president at HR, said Kaiser Permanente's labor management and partnership was created 24 years ago and has a great track record of serving as the framework through which we solve some of the very difficult problems. Instead of abandoning it in the spirit of the partnership, we ask union leaders to continue to work constructively towards an agreement rather than calling nurses and other employees to walk away from patients who need them during this pandemic. Again, patients need you, but you also need the nurses, and you need to treat them. Again, like that's the argument. You should treat them like human beings. You need to give them the pay and conditions and all that they need and deserve for the work that they do overtime and the PTSD that they don't just have from working at their job, and then the treatment that they get on top of that is just so awful to hear about, especially with the essential worker kind of fraud that so many corporations were doing with the pandemic. So, with after 4 months of negotiations with the Alliance of Motion Pictures, the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees announced a strike authorization for 60,000 workers across the film and television industry. So, other groups, we are seeing several other large groups of workers have voted to authorize strikes around the U.S. while continuing new contract negotiations, such as 2,000 frontier communications workers in California, transit workers in Beaumont, Texas, and Akron, Ohio, about 450 public works employees at the Northwestern University, and 450 public works employees in Minneapolis, Minnesota, dining workers at Northwestern University, and hundreds of group home workers at Connecticut. Graduate workers at Harvard and Columbia University are currently holding strike authorization votes, and Illinois State University graduate workers have authorized the bargaining team to call for a strike vote. All right, so yeah, very, very exciting times. Definitely going to be interesting to see how all these strikes will turn out. If anyone's get to be pretty major, we'll keep you posted on them. The IATSE strike definitely in Hollywood going to be a very, very big deal culturally. So it's going to be interesting to see how the industry responds to that. But we also now we have a very fun and viral video for you here. This is Kristen Cinema teaching at a class somewhere. At ASU. So this is Blanca, an Arizona immigrant youth activist from Lucha. Is an activist living United for Change in Arizona, talking to Kristen Cinema when she left her classroom, and pretty much she goes into the restroom to try and get them out of the way. But they're women, and she's a woman, so they follow her in, and just talk to her.
Okay, I'll be back.
So then we want to talk to you real quick. Want to talk to you real quick?
Hi, actually, I am heading out.
But right now is a real moment that our people need in order for us to be able to talk about what's really happening. We need a Build Back Better plan right now.
We knocked on doors. We need solutions to the Build Back Better plan.
Yeah, so she pretty much goes in the bathroom, close the door.
We knocked on doors for you to get you elected, and just how we got you elected, we can get you out of office if you don't support what you promised us.
We need 7 million citizenship for 7 million. We need the Build Back Better plan right now.
My name is Blanca. I was brought here to the United States when I was 3 years old. And in 2010, my grandparents both got deported because of SB 1070. And I'm here because I definitely believe that we need a pathway to citizenship. My grandfather passed away 2 weeks ago, and I was not able to go to Mexico and visit him because there is no pathway to citizenship. And if we have the opportunity to pass it right now, then we need to do it, because there's millions of undocumented people just like me who share the same story or even worse things that happen to them because of SB 1070 and because of anti-immigrant legislation. And this is the opportunity to pass it right now, and we need to hold you accountable to what
very
you told
awkward.
us,
She's just
what
like,
you
the
promised
filming
us
is
that
just
you
pretty
were
much
going
of
to pass
a
when we knocked on
empty,
doors for
or
you.
not empty,
It's
just
not
like
right.
a row of like bathroom stalls. She's in there.
I'm
She
a
pretty much comes
survivor.
out.
I'm a survivor of human trafficking, and it's because of the lack of worker protections that we don't have in the gig economy.
So pretty much people who have been absolutely screwed, and all these very much real grievances, and they're saying them in a polite way, but they're just doing it in a very uncomfortable place, at her job, and pretty much a place where she was supposed to be able to go to out of the way of these rabble rousers, as people in DC would call them, people who actually have real problems and have been through things in life, and actually want to see them possibly get addressed at some point or another. So this is actually what Joe Biden had to say about it earlier today.
And just watch, Mr. President, you're talking about how you have 48 Democratic votes right now. The other two have been pressured over the weekend by activists. Joe Manchin had people on kayaks show up to his boat to yell at him. Senator Sinema last night was chased into a restroom.
Again, the idea that the kayak voters were yelling, it was pretty much like anyone who watched the video would say that is a completely like normal conversation. Again, just happened at a place where the rabble rousers are supposed to be out of the picture, and that's really what made a lot of people more uncomfortable than rather than the fact that they were just there in the first place. And then with Sinema, they're not harassing her, they're not yelling these insults at her in a particularly vicious way. They're just, saying, hey, I had incredible trauma in life. We really worked hard for you because we thought you would be different. We thought you would be able to get this stuff done for us. You promised to get this stuff done for us. You're not getting it done. We tried to meet with you for years and years and years. Why? That is pretty much what they are going to say. And this is what Biden had to say about that.
Do you think that those tactics are crossing a line?
I don't think they're appropriate tactics, but it happens to everybody. From the only people it doesn't happen to are people who have Secret Service standing around them. It's part of the process. Yes, sir.
So pretty much Biden just going up there and saying, deal with it, which is honestly probably the right thing to do because Biden, he wants this bill to get passed more than anything. It's his big bill, probably going to be huge for the future of the Democrats if they have any case to make to people in the midterms. And with that, we will be saying so long.